How are you?
We finally get together. What's going on? How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How about you?
Good. Everything's good. Great to meet you. Thanks for taking a minute out. And I love your story. And before we get into our mix, Mr. Jackson, which I believe I've already played on the show. I love the album. I'm old school,
Sweet.
so I got a CD player in the car. So my son
Ah,
and I we blaze around Kansas City listening to jazz.
sweet. That's
So
good.
it's good. But
Good.
I want to begin our conversation before we delve into the album by talking about living through a pandemic as an artist the last 3.5 years. How did you get through it, and how did it subsequently change you?
Oh, wow. What a fantastic question. Um, well, so my day job is a university professor.
Yeah.
So the primary shift for me in my life was that I did not go to my university building for the first year. We did not have in-person classes. So I had to transition to doing everything that you do through the human contact and room, in-person making of music to trying to channel all that through a computer. So that was a huge challenge. I think, obviously in terms of professional things, there were no live performances. I did a fair amount of streaming performances after that became a thing. We could meet one-on-one. So later on in the pandemic, it put together performances with, no audience or streaming things for festivals, my own presentations. So that was interesting. And obviously not as satisfying as performing for people live, but was still good. And then the other thing, I think the upside of what happened was that um, we were able to use the virtual channels to connect artist to artist in ways that we wouldn't necessarily have. So among other things, our university started a Zoom weekly like gathering with students, which we used to do in person. And because everyone was home, Christian McBride showed up, Cindy Blackman showed up, Patrice Rushen showed up. I mean, it was so I feel like for us as a community, we were able to make connections we never would have been able to make if those people had to fly to us. And I think for me as an artist, it was really the pandemic will always be tied into the sort of moment of racial reckoning and around George Floyd and activism. And so for me, that period of time was very much about how can I use whatever musical tools I have to affect change, positive change in that way. So then it just became, connecting with musicians in whatever way I could to make that happen.
So this album is a dedication. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I started the MJ New group. We started that in I think 2013 because we were asked by Don Lukoff, who at the time was the executive director, artistic director of the Portland Jazz Festival, to do a tribute concert for the Modern Jazz Quartet, and I thought that was really interesting. And as usual, when somebody asked me to do that, I'm an academic, so I'm like I'm not just gonna you know cover some tunes. I'm going to go back and dig into the catalog and learn stuff and try and it was fascinating. And the group of players that I put together for that, bassist Marcus Shelby from San Francisco, myself, and vibraphonist Mike Horsfall from Portland, and a drummer also from Portland named Carlton Jackson. We just hit it off. We had a blast, and I just like this should not be a one off. Let's keep doing this. So we booked gigs and year after year stayed together, started doing events here, concerts here, festivals, chamber series, and expanding the repertoire. And it just became like a regular group. And so we had gone into the studio in 2018, I think, to like make this recording. We've done some touring and then went into the studio, and then so we started that, got the recording down, working through things. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, our drummer, Carlton Jackson, unexpectedly passed away. And then we were sort of faced with this question, like, do we keep the bands? Do we just abandon this project? But we decided that we wanted to keep the music going. And so we said, okay, I'm finished this record. I'm going to put it out. I'm going to dedicate it to Carlton Jackson, who is our Mr. Jackson, and also, to the spirit of Milt Jackson, who I feel like is so prevalent in the sound and the context of the music that inspired us from the modern jazz quartet. So it's dedicated. The album is dedicated to Carlton's memory and also to the spirit of Milt Jackson.
So what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
Well, uh, as with all music, I hope that this this album provides listeners an opportunity to feel, I'm hoping that the music affects people emotionally. I hope that it's intriguing and interesting intellectually, but really, to me, it's all about what kind of feeling can you create with the vibrations. We covered MJQ music. We do, because I have a classical background and I love chamber music. We cover and sort of not cover, but rearrange and reinvent some classical pieces. And I've always been reharming jazz standards and do that. So I feel like it's a really an eclectic but really cohesive blend of musical repertoire, and hopefully makes this compelling statement that brings that evokes some of the swing and sophistication of the modern jazz quartet, but also intrigues people with the variety of sounds and touches their hearts.
So all of this began in 1988 with Betty Carter, but take me back a little bit to the beginnings of why music and more specifically jazz became a part of your orbit and eventually became your focus in life.
Yeah. Um, Well, I grew up in a musical family. My mother was a singer, and I grew up playing for her in church and nursing homes. We had a family religious radio show when I was a kid, like a 10-minute music radio show. And my dad would read scripture, my mom would sing, my brother and sister and I would play. And so, and I had been studying classical music. So early on, people were recognizing that I had a musical talent, and I was raised in the kind of environment where, you know, if God gave you a gift, it was your moral obligation to develop it to the nth degree and to use it for good. So it was pretty obvious that I was going to be a musician from the earliest. And classical didn't really resonate with me for some obvious reasons. But when I first heard jazz and started playing in jazz bands in fourth grade, I'm like, I could do this, just from noodling on top of the piano, but then from hearing, my first or silver record, and I remember hearing that it was finger popping, and I got it 75 cents at the used record store, 1950s vinyl, like a quarter-inch thick. Put that on. I played. They were playing "Cooking from the Continental," and and I ran upstairs. I remember I was in the basement. I ran upstairs to my mom. I was like, "You got to hear this! You got to hear this! This is unbelievable!" And I couldn't explain to her what it was. It was swing, was what it was. I was just like, this is it. This is the thing." So from that point on, I was kind of felt like, okay, this is where I want to go. And all of my heroes, led me to wanting to find a way to be in that world, to be in that music.
And you've been in this world for decades. What is it that you love the most about it? You have all these capacities as a recording artist, live performer, educator, but at the end of the day, what gets you up in the morning? What drives you to be a part of this jazz community?
Hmm, that's a great question. Um, I often tell my students that, like, I mean, jazz is a musical form. You could call it a genre, but really it's a culture. And I I am so privileged to be a part of the legacy of the African American contribution to world culture. I feel like, what keeps me in it is the power in it to change the world. And it's just, it's no more worthy a vehicle than other cultural contributions, but it's the one that have the closest, connection to. And so I feel like my insistence on understanding it, but also being my full diverse human self, and bringing that to this vehicle is really what I can do and the contribution I can make. So all of those things, whether I'm teaching it, I'm passing on the information that mentors pass on to me, guiding young people into it, writing it, applying it to, to heal people and audiences, using it as a voice to affect change, activism, all of that. I feel like I'm fortunate to have a vehicle that's expansive enough and inclusive enough to be able to do that kind of work in the world. So and plus all the people. I mean, if you got to hang around with Esperanza Spalding and Brian Blade, wouldn't you do whatever
Sure.
whatever that thing was?
Yeah.
So that's another thing. That community is like, oh my God, I just pinch myself to be able to know these people and be engaged with them.
And one of the virtues, one of the highest virtues of the jazz community is there's this torch that from the beginning has been passed on from the elders and legends. They've made very clear that they want to pass this on to successive generations. And you've been around from Betty Carter to Christian McBride to all the other cats that we've mentioned so far. You've been around heavy hitters, and you're an elder in this art form. What do you ultimately want to teach and lend to the younger generations that you want them to really hold on to? What is one of your top priorities as an educator?
Well, the way that I always try and, approach it with my students is that um, jazz is a practice. Jazz is my practice. And so I want I want two things. I want them to understand the power of a practice, of what happens when you sort of, it's not just the time that you spend at the instrument, it's the time that you spend thinking about it and communing with others around it. So I'm trying to get them to see that it's not just like a technical facility issue. It's not just a playing issue. It's a practice in which you can learn and enrich your life. It's a practice that can teach you courage. It teaches you creativity. It teaches you communication. It teaches you about democratic principles. I mean, all of those things, I think, so I want them to understand that, and I want them to come to a sense of their agency. And I also want them to develop the courage to be themselves, to say what they have to say. And that's one of the challenges, as you say you have a son, so you understand one of the challenges of growing up in the world. It's like, who are you? I mean, aside from what your parents say and what the world says you are, who are you? And I feel like jazz is a great discipline and practice in which to develop that. So that's that. And then I guess the thing overall that I want all young people to know is that you have agency. You
Yeah.
can you can move in the world with agency. So,
So
and
Darrell,
the
what's
history
that?
of the history of music, of jazz music, happens to be fortunate to be full of those people, of the
Yeah,
Max Roaches and the Sonny Rollins and the Wayne Shorters and the all those people.
absolutely. So Darrell, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, students, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Wow, man, this is awesome. I'm like, what a great wow. Okay.
This is entering therapy hour.
Well, no, this is the real stuff. This is really good.
Yeah.
It's really useful to think about. I was just thinking about this the other day, because my son has some musical talent that I feel like exponentially supersedes mine. And we all know that life is not just about talent. But I was trying to think about, well, what is my gift? I've never felt like I'm not the Oscar Peterson kind of player. I'm not, I mean, it's easier for us to think of all the things that we're not. Um, but I think that what I have that I can do well is I can connect with people on a human level. And when I use music in that way, like not in a self-serving way, but in a way of like and not in a self-aggrandizing, like, okay, look at me and my Grammy. But when I sort of engage in music that way, and I think I have the power to wield it in a way that connects people. And so I think that's what people see in me. I mean, I've always gotten that, even when I was a kid, like I didn't know why people thought I was good. I really didn't. I didn't really see it. But I think in listening to what people said over and over, it's like, we just love watching you play. We just love listening to you play. There's something that's communicated in the act of making music that people get. And so I guess what I'm trying to do, even now, 60, 61, is to trust that more and more and to sort of act on the basis of that more and more and to not be distracted by trying to compare myself with what this person did. Or, I mean, for the longest time in my life, I just wanted to be Herbie and Quincy. That was
Yeah.
like, if I could do that, I would be happy. But now it's like I have to spend all of my time just trying to be Darrell and celebrate that and push forward on that, lean into that. So that's kind of what I'm trying to understand and do more of now.
So the new album, as I mentioned, is wonderful. I urge everyone to go out and get it. Where's the best place to pick it up? What's going on as far as a new year, live shows, anything that's going on in your world, performance wise?
Yeah. Well, the best place, the easiest place for people to pick it up is Bandcamp. If they go to my website, darrellgrant.com, then there's a link there, or they can just, enter Darrell Grant with Bandcamp. That will come up. So people can hear it there and purchase it there. In terms of the performance, I'm just sort of, I've been doing a lot of composing, so I have a premiere that's coming up in March for a new composition for an ensemble called Resonance Ensemble. So that's happening. And MJ New is going to be touring in the summer, and we have performances at the Healdsburg Jazz Festival and at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts and the Sound Room in Oakland, and hopefully put together a whole Western States tour around that for June. So that's the next plan we'll be doing with the group.
Excellent. Darrell, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for your insight. Best of luck with the album and with 2024. I appreciate it, man.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Great to talk to you.
Great talking to you.